Joshua chapter number 4, you stand with me if you're able. I'll read just a few verses of Scripture here. Now get this picture in your mind, what's going on, where we're at historically in the book of Joshua. The children of Israel have gone across the Red Sea. They've wandered in the wilderness. Moses is now dead, and it's now time for Joshua to lead the children of Israel across the Jordan River and into the Promised Land. Now, we sing a lot of songs, and I'm not finding fault with the songs, but scripturally, the Promised Land, the Canaan land, is not heaven. It's not. Now, I don't think you've done harm by saying that, getting God's promised land, going to heaven. But the promised land scripturally is far more fitting to say that it's a victorious, successful Christian life. You don't have to fight for heaven. That fight's already been won. But to have a victorious Christian life is a daily battle. It's a daily struggle. When they got into the Promised Land and crossed the Jordan River, the battle just began. They had to take the land. They had to fight. If you try to live for God, it'll be a daily battle, I promise. Why? The devil will do all that he can. Your flesh will do what it can to hinder you from living for God. So that's the picture that we've seen. And when Joshua comes to the Jordan River, you may be familiar with the story. Joshua says that the priests are going to go out with the Ark of the Covenant. And when they stand in the water, when they step foot, God's going to stop the river, dry up the land. We're going to cross over. And that's exactly what happens. They cross in the wet time of the season. They cross right on over, get to the other side. The familiar part that's been preached, and I want to approach it maybe some different aspects of it. When they go into the water, Joshua tells one man from each tribe. I believe he gets a strapping, strong man. Says, pick a rock up out of the river and put it on your shoulder. So it's not a small rock. Put it up on your shoulder and carry it out. We're going to take it and set up a memorial. And that's what they do. But he also says to take rocks and stack them up inside of the river. Let's read about it. Joshua chapter number 4, verse number 1. And it came to pass when all the people were clean passed over Jordan. That means they were all over. It says that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, take ye 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe a man, and command ye them, saying, take ye hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones. That's each man was to take a stone from the middle of the river where the priest had stood, and ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge this night. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel out of every tribe, a man. And Joshua said unto them, pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of Jordan, and take you up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what mean ye by these stones? Those 12 stones that were carried out. That ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off from before the ark, the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off. And these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. Verse 8. And the children of Israel did so as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, as the Lord spake unto Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them into the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of Jordan, there in the middle of the river, in the place where the feet of the priests which bear the ark of the covenant stood, and they are there unto this day. I want to preach on a simple thought, some things to forget, some things to remember. Let's pray. Father, I do thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. God, I thank you for the open door to be at the house of God. Lord, thank you for the good number, for the faithfulness of your people. God, I pray that you would touch this evening. Help us to be closer to you. Help us to be better for you, God, when this evening's done. God, I do pray that you'd help our church to go forward. Lord, help us as we begin to get back into ministry. God, I pray that you would honor the effort in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You could be seated this evening. Now, when you look at this passage, it's nothing odd or unfamiliar probably to you than what's going on in this passage, but you see two piles of rocks stacked up before this passage ends. One pile, Joshua tells the people to get stones out of the river and take them with you, and we're going to set up a memorial where we lodge at, and that's in Gilgal. But he said God had allowed Joshua to stack up rocks in the middle of the Jordan River. Now remember, the Jordan River is the place where they're leaving, they're delivered in the wilderness, but they're not in victory. And they cross the Jordan and get to victory. I believe Joshua is making a statement saying, let's leave some things from the past behind behind and we're going on. So when they looked at the memorials in the future, when they looked at those children would ask about the stones, they could say, hey, there's stones in the river too. You can't see them, but there's some things I've left behind. Do you know there's some of you folks in this church before, and I would never dream of your past being what it was had you not told me your testimony. There are people in this building tonight, I've always thought you've lived a good Christian life by just you being here. I've only known you to be in church. I've only known you to be around the things of God. I don't know your past. I don't know the things that you did before you got saved. I have no clue some of the things you did. I believe we could parade a few people across this platform this evening and say, would you be honest enough and give a testimony of where God delivered you from? And some of your mouths would drop open when you heard about some of the people and who they are now that they've gotten saved. Do you know why? They left things of the past behind when they got victory, and they don't want to go back to them again. You know, it's not about that you forget where you came from, but you don't dwell on those things of the past, like your failures of the past. You can't kick yourself around forever. You learn from your failures, but you don't stop because of your failures. Be real honest. Let's raise hands. I'll raise mine first. How many of you have ever missed a day in your whole Christian life reading your Bible? You ever missed a day praying? In all of your Christian life, have you ever missed church when you honestly could have went? Oh, that's probably, so look how this is. Well, that's your failures. Well, you could go back and kick yourself. I remember one time I missed church. Might not have been too long ago. And then you might have said, well, I should have been there. I could have been there, but I'm not there. And I just don't. And you could kick yourself while you're down. No, move on. That's done. If you ask God to forgive you, be done with it. There's things in my past that I'm ashamed of, that I wish I never had done, but if I dwell on them, I can't go forward. You see, God wants you to move on. One of the reasons some people can't live in victory is because they won't let go of the struggles of the past. Bury those in the Jordan River and move on. There are some things in your life you need to forget about. Yes, you might have made some really bad decisions in your life. But guess what? That's done. If you got saved since then, they're buried under the blood. If you've asked God to forgive you, they're done. I knew a man one time, he had gotten married and just married the wrong woman. And I spoke to a man this week, and he told me, he said, I married the wrong woman. He said, and I ruined it. I believe God wanted me to be a preacher, and I married the wrong woman and got divorced and married another woman. And he began to go through this just tumultuous affair of relationships. And he said, I messed up. And I said, you know, if you dwell on it now, you can never live for God for the rest of your life. I said, just because you can't be a preacher don't mean you can't serve God. You know what he's begun to do? He's begun to be the man, he's an under-rower. You know, if most of you have heard the preacher's message, as we were pulling away from that meeting the other night, we looked over and there were people just cleaning up, tidying up, doing whatever, all in this open-air arbor. And Natalie looked at me and she said, there are under-rowers. Nobody knew who they were. They were just, after everybody was gone, they were still rowing the boat, getting everything done. You can't dwell on the failures of the past. You can't dwell on your formalism of the past. You can't dwell on your faking of the past. How many of you ever faked living for God and you knew it was fake? Yeah. I want to ask you to raise hands. Your arm's going to get tired for the night's done, right? All of us have been fakers before. Do you ever try to let everybody think you were more spiritual than you really were? Yeah, probably somewhere along the line. Do you know those failures are done? But I don't want to dwell on your failures. I want to look at what happens here. Now get this picture in your mind. Joshua tells them, now I will not have 12 points. They've got 12 stones. I ought to get me 12 big boulders, bring them up and name each one. Y'all go, I'm out of here as soon as I walked in the door, right? You get the 12 stones and they get these big old rocks, they put them up on their shoulder, and they said, I want you to carry these, and you're going to take them back to Gilgal. Gilgal is Joshua's home base of operations. Gilgal was where they received David after Absalom's rebellion was squelched. Gilgal is the place where they had the school of prophets under Elijah and Elisha. It was a very familiar place, or it would be, to the children of Israel. And God has them set up these gigantic stones, and he puts them in a pile where everybody sees them. And here's the purpose. Now, they knew why the stones were there. But years later, when those people had children and they had children, and they walked by and they said, Daddy, what's that pile of rocks in town for? And he could say, well, before you were ever born, maybe when I was a little boy, God allowed Joshua to lead the children of Israel across the river. And they said, did they swim? Oh, no, they didn't swim. Let me tell you what happened. God parted the waters and we walked across on dry land. Is that for real, Dad? Sure as the world. Those stones right there came out of the middle of the river. When it was dry. Guess what, son? Joshua stacked up some in the river. You can't see them, but those are the things we want to forget about. but they could look and see these memorials of things God had done for them. You know, one of the things we do in our Christian life is we go on, if you've ever had God answer a prayer and meet a very specific need, and then the next time a need comes up, you ever start wringing your hands, oh, Lord, I don't know what we're going to do. God, I don't know how we're going to make this happen. Didn't He already do it before? I was always amazed when, all of us are familiar with the feeding of the 5,000. Just a few loaves and fishes. And it's not too much longer after that. There's another big crowd, and they're going, oh, Lord, how are we going to feed them? Well, He feeds the 4,000 with a few loaves and fishes. If the Lord's met your need before, God doesn't forget about it. He can meet your need again and again and again and again. So I think some stones of remembrance are important. I've got, Wednesday night, I had a message in a box. Well, those of you that were in there, all of you got candles. Well, tonight we got a message in a bag. All right, I'm going to show you some things this evening. Don't miss Wednesday school. Brother Paquette will be back in there, and if he's going the direction he told me that he might go, I'm looking forward to hearing it. Don't miss out. Now, I've got some stones of remembrance from my house in this bag. They won't mean a lot to you, but when I show them to you, and I'll show you why they matter and in what areas they matter, I dare say you've got some stones of remembrance in your home. Probably everybody knows what this is. This is a Schofield Bible. It's probably 28, 29, pushing 30 years old. And I've had it that whole time. You say, okay, well, you got a Bible. Well, that's good, Brother Justin. You're probably like me. I got a number of Bibles. I keep this in one room of my house, and probably 99 out of 100 times, if I'm reading a Bible in that room, this is the one that I've got, and I'll read it. And it sits in there. Say, okay, well, you got a Bible in the room. So what, Brother Justin? This Bible's not just any Bible. You say, well, yeah, it's a Schofield Reference Bible. Well, I use a Thompson chain here. So that's not even what I'm referring to. But I'm referring to remembering some things, remembering those that instructed you in the past. This came from my youth leader when I was in the Methodist church. You say, okay, well, that's good. It's a memorial. It is, but let me tell you why. Do you know until then, I read an NIV until I got this King James Bible right here? And he told me why there was a difference. If you don't know why there's a difference, you flip over. Let's flip over there. Y'all got a second? Good. Acts chapter number 8. I'm just going to give you one example this evening. Acts chapter number 8. He showed me this. Acts chapter number 8 is the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, and he's going down the road, and Philip's preaching unto him Jesus, and he's telling him the gospel, and the Ethiopian eunuch, they pass some water, and he says, what doth hinder me to be baptized? In other words, Philip, why can I not get baptized? And let me tell you what Philip replies. Acts chapter number 8, let's read verse number 37. The Bible says, and Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. He said, in other words, if you get saved, you can get baptized. And then it says, and he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. What happens in verse 37? The Ethiopian eunuch just got saved. I'll show you why this is an important Bible to me. Because the man that gave it to me said, do you realize that verse 37 is not in the NIV and a lot of the new translations? I said, nuh-uh. He said, well, get it out and look. And I said, I'll show you. And I opened up, and it said verse 36, had a little note. Verse 38, there was no verse 37. Had a little note, and if you go to the footnotes, it had somewhat of a summary of the verse that I just read. It's gone. He's the one that showed me that. He's the one that taught me about how you ought to dress right. He's the one that taught me about how you ought to soul win. He's the one that showed me those things. He was an instructor in my life. You know, I'm thankful for those people that poured their lives into mine. Amen. You look back at who made an impact in your life, why you are who you are today. Young people, you ought to be thankful for Brother Kimmer trying to pour into your lives. Why? Because trying to make an impact then make a long-term impact forever in your life. My youth leader one year, I think I was a senior in high school, and I think it was going out that year, it was the one before, he came every night to the church to meet with us young people. Every night. He wasn't married, so he could, but he came every night. He came, and he would preach to us. He would counsel us. He would just spend time with us. Guess what? Some nights we'd all lay out, and none of us showed up. But we knew he would be there. You know what he showed me? He showed me it was commitment. He was there if it was 1, if it was 2, if it was 10. I remember getting here, he would come and he would preach to us. We'd do preaching services on Fridays and Saturdays. Some nights he would preach to 2 people. But he still got up and he still preached. You know why? If a preacher calls and says, Brother Justin, will you come preach? I say, sure. I don't say, well, how many people are you going to have in the congregation? You know why? Because I had somebody that was willing to pour into my life to 1 or 2 people. It's not about the number. It's about you never know who God's got in the crowd. You see, you can be an instructor to somebody. You can make an impact in somebody's life. Who is it that's a memorial in your life? And somebody say, my kids could say, Brother Justin, or say, Daddy, why you got that Bible? That one's old and raggedy. Well, that Bible's special. Why? Because of who gave it to me. Dr. Caudill poured into my life. There's people that are memorials that I am who I am today as a believer because of that. Do you know I want to be that to somebody else? I want to be that to somebody else. Let me show you something that'll link right to this. I've got a picture here. I got it even in a pretty frame. I know y'all can't see that. Oh, y'all about to see this picture. Y'all getting closer. Can y'all see it up there? See it back there? All right. Y'all can see this picture. Y'all really can't, but it's a crowd of kids. If you want to see it, I'll let you see it. You give me $1 after service. This picture's a special picture to me. You say, why? It was taken in what's the offices now, but it wasn't the offices back then. This picture is when we'd already built on the new section of that old section. When you walk in, there was an old part, and then we built on the back. Some of you at Calvary remember when we did that when Dr. Caudill was here. And when we first started Super Church, Preacher Hayes told me, he said, Brother Justin, he said, I want you to do the children's ministry. And I said, Preacher, if you feel led, I'll do it. And he said, all right. And I said, well, give me a couple months to get ready. He said, you start the first week in February. That's like 2 weeks away. I said, okay, well, we're starting. He came in October. We started in February. I always have to ask Miss Brenda, how long has the preacher been here? Then I know how long I've been in Super Church. I can show you this. This is from the first year we were in Super Church. It's a picture of Natalie and 6 of the kids that rode the buses in. There's a little girl here. She had a twin sister. And both of them, I couldn't figure out who was who. They were 2 little Hispanic girls. I could never figure out who it was. Who was who? One of them was sweet as syrup. And one was mean as the devil. And I finally figured out how to tell them apart. You ever seen twins and you can't tell who's who? Brother Corey's not here today. I still don't know who's Colton and who's Kaysen. So I'll say, Colton, Kaysen, come on over here. And then I get it right. These 2 girls, they were in there, and I finally realized how it was. Because the one little girl, when she smiled, she just looked pleasant. The other girl smiled like, I'm about to do something. And I look at this picture. I only remember 2 kids' names from this picture. Every now and again, one will kind of fire off in my head, but I can only remember 2 off the top of my head. But there's 6 kids right here. And I look at this picture sometimes. And it sits in my office, and I say, wonder where those kids are at now. That's probably 16 years ago. These kids are probably 24, 25, 26. They probably have kids of their own. And I wonder sometimes, I wonder if they ever think about riding the old yellow church bus and come riding in. It wasn't too long ago, Brother Brad probably remembers, there were some kids used to ride in on their route. And it was Omar and Jose, and there was a couple of them, and they had 2 sisters, and I saw one of their sisters. I was in a store, don't remember where, this has probably been a year or so ago, and I walked in, and I thought, she kind of looks familiar, but I think everybody looks familiar. And I was standing there, hey, how are you? And she said, good. She said, and she was like looking at me, and I could tell I was thinking, she's really looking at me. I think I know who this is, I don't know who this is, but I know who this is. And I said, did you ever come to Calvary Baptist Church? That's usually the first question I ask them, because if it's somebody younger, that's probably where I've seen them. She said, I thought that was you. She said, you're just as handsome as you've always been. No, I'm just kidding. And make sure y'all still paying attention. She said, I thought that was you. She said, are you still doing that children's church? I said, I sure am. She went, you know, I want to make an influence in somebody else's life. I don't want to be the one where years down the road somebody looks and they say, yeah, he used to be faithful. He used to be involved. He used to do this or that. I want to be where I'm faithful. And I run into young people, and it doesn't happen a lot, but I'll run into a kid that used to ride the route. And then they recognize me, and I recognize them, and I'll say, hey, I think I know you. And they'll say, you're Brother Justin, or you're the kids' preacher, or whatever it is. Do you know you may be making an impact? You don't even know who it is. Well, that's a memorial to me. It reminds me of how important my service is. It doesn't matter if there's 5 or 50. Your service is important. Why? Because you're pouring into somebody's life. You never know when you say something how far it can go. My dad told me years ago, said, always be complimentary and always be praising of people what they're worthy of. I said, why? He said, because you never know what they'll need and you never know how they may never forget it. Don't know where these kids are at. Don't know what they're doing in life. Brother Paquette's got a memorial down in Mexico. It's not to his praise and glory. But if somebody were to send him a picture of the sign from out in front of that church, you know what that would be? A memorial. He could say, I was able to make a difference in somebody else's life. I was able to impact somebody. Bus workers, you may not be able to ride the bus right now. You may not be able to do the things that you want to do. But every time you've ever got on that bus, you were able to make a difference in some kid's life. Here's the thought. Whose life are you impacting? I want to be an instructor. I want to be an influencer in someone else's life. My kids asked me one time, they said, who are those kids? And I said, way before y'all were born, those were the children's church kids. Just a few of them. Let me show you something else. Not only do we have an instructors and to be an influence, but I want to be involved. So what are you talking about? I don't know if y'all can see what this is. Those of you that have had preschoolers and toddlers, y'all know what little people are? Fisher Price, they look like big, clunky little people. Nothing moves on them. They're just little figures. This is the baby Jesus. I'll stand still. Maybe they can show it up on the screen there. Can y'all see that? I think zooms in pretty good, but it's just like a blob in my hand, don't it? Ask these young people, they'll tell you. It looks like what we would consider the baby Jesus. The baby Jesus was not nearly as white as this baby is I got in my hand. But it's the little people. Came in a little set. Had a Mary and a Joseph and a couple shepherds and some wise men and a camel and a little manger scene. And when Meredith was about 2 years old, we gave it to her coming up into Christmas. And she loved that set. She would have those toys and be playing with them. She loved this thing. The only part that I know that we have today is this. And I'll tell you why. It's a memorial to me. I want to be involved in my children's life and make an impact where they realize what Christmas is all about. Where they realize what Christianity is all about, where they realize what the focus in life should be. Meredith would always keep the baby Jesus in the center of the manger scene. And she always said, well, that's where he goes. She said that's where he goes because she was 2, and that's where you always put the baby Jesus in a manger scene. But isn't that where he ought to be all the time? One night, it was about 2 in the morning, and I hear her crying. Now, I asked her, I said, can I tell this story? She said, yeah. It's like 2 in the morning, and I hear her crying. So Natalie and I get up. We think it's just more of not a distressed panic cry, but I thought something's wrong. And we go in there, and I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she said, I can't find Jesus. I said, do what? She said, I can't find Jesus, and I need Jesus, and I got to find Jesus. I'm thinking, well, she's 2. She's not ready to be saved. She said, well, I can't find the baby Jesus. I thought, well, you in bed, number one. No wonder you can't find him. She didn't know where he was at. You say, what'd you do? We started searching the house for the baby Jesus. You say, why? Because I wanted to go to bed again. Till we found the baby Jesus, nobody was sleeping in that house. We started looking, I don't know what. We didn't look but a few minutes, and I thought, she was playing in the living room. I thought, look under the couch. And I looked, and there lay the baby Jesus. And I pulled this little baby Jesus out, and I took it, and she grabbed it, rolled over, went to sleep, and that was it. I said, what are you getting at? Do you know every time I look at this, I start thinking about how distressed she was because she didn't have a hold of Jesus? Do you see the picture of that? I want to make an impact in my kid's life by being involved. You may say, well, my kid goes to Sunday school. They'll make the impact. It's not up to the Sunday school teacher to impact your kid, be the number one role model. It's not up to the preacher to educate them on everything Christian. That's your job. I want my kids to see memorials. I want them to hear about the times where God met a need. I want to make the impact where they see the time that maybe we got done wrong, but we still had the right testimony, where we took the right stand when everybody else was going wrong. I want them to see that. I want them to see the difference. You say, why? Because I want them to know what the focus needs to be. There's memorials in your life. I want to leave behind things. When I'm dead and gone, hopefully a long time from now, I hope Meredith will grab this little baby Jesus. And then when her kids say, why is Grandpa, or maybe before I die, say, why has Grandpa got a little baby Jesus in his office? And she can tell them why. Because when I was 2 years old, And they may think it's silly then, but guess what? They'll know the purpose. They'll get the point. I want my children to see the memorials of what's right. They've got all kind of junk to deal with. I want to impact what's right. Let me give you one more and we'll be done. I've got a bulletin board. My office looks like an explosion went off, and it's bad. If you wanted to see it, I'd show it to you, but it's bad. I mean, it's just like piles, and it's gotten so bad now. That office has become I want to keep this, but Daddy, I don't want to throw it away. Put it in your office. And the office is like as big as for me, this area right here. It's got a desk and bookshelves. It's not enough room. So now when I go to my desk, I step like this to get on in. It's getting where I about can't stretch far enough anymore. It's getting bad. But I've got the books. This sits up on the shelf. I've got a vase that the Whites gave me. It's got a W and a Bible verse on the back. It sits where I sit at my desk. It's sitting right over there. I got a plaque Brother Mike and Mrs. Patty gave me. Boy, it's just one Brother Mike. He said marriage starts like a deck of cards with 2 hearts and a diamond, but it ends with a club and a spade. So that's just Brother Mike, isn't it? Brother, that's in my office. I think about them every time I see it. And I say, God, don't let her get the spade, right? And I see these things, and they're memorials, but right when you walk in the door, you go around to my desk and you sit down and you look straight ahead, there's a cork board there. I've got some different Bible verses, just things written big that I want to see that really stand out, 1 or 2 quotes that really just hit the mark, that resonated with me, but I've got a picture on that board as well. I've got a picture of me and Brother Matt Allen. This is from 2011. See, I wrote her names on it because I'm getting old. I know who it was. So. 2011. Now, a lot of you know who Brother Matt is. Some of you don't. He's our missionary to Papua New Guinea. When he was on the mission, or before he went to the mission field when he was in college, he was going to church here. I'll tell you how I met him. I thought he was the weirdest guy I'd met in a long time. Now, I love Brother Matt. I'd fight you for Brother Matt now. I would. I love him. Boy, he's my hero. Brother Matt, one night, I was taking Natalie back to college up in Winston where she was going, and there was a guy came up to me, and I was standing here, and he got this close, and I had this magnetic bumper sticker that had a Bible verse on it. And he got real close. He said, "Where'd you get your bumper sticker?" And I'm like, "At a youth meeting." I'm leaning back, and he's like coming at me, and I'm thinking, "Man, look, bro, I don't know you. He said, "Where was it at?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, okay, I've heard of that church." And he said, "Where do you go to church at?" I said, "Calvary Baptist in Statesville." He said, "I'm going to come visit." And I said, "Okay." And he went off, and I told Natalie, I said, "Who's that weirdo?" She said, "Him and his fiance came up from Florida. That's where they was in college. He's different." They just were different. Little did I know how different Brother Matt was, but not in the wrong way. Brother Matt called Dr. Caudle, and Brother Caudle said he drilled me with 1,000,000 questions about the church and what we believed. And he came in at the Bible college where she went for music. You had to declare a home church that you would work out of, and you had 6 weeks to pick it. When he came to Calvary, he was on his last weekend to declare his home church. And God knitted his heart with ours. And I love Brother Matt. Brother Matt's a missionary in Papua New Guinea. You ever see, those of you that don't know, it's just north of Australia is the island of New Guinea, and he's on the right-hand side. You ever see National Geographic, the people with the bones in their nose and the feathers through their ears? That's where it's at. Now, they don't dress like that all the time. They dress like normal people, but that's ceremonial, but that's where it's at. Cannibalism was there until like 1950s, and that's where he went to move to the jungle. And I told Brother Matt when God just knitted my heart with him, and I loved him. Boy, he was such a help to me. And I told him, I said, "Brother Matt, when you go to the mission field, I'm going to keep praying for you. I love you, brother." Now, there wasn't Facebook and all this back then when he was first going to the mission field. He went and you got his letter every other month or however often it was. That's the only way you knew what was going on. Now you can stay way more in tune. And I told him, I said, "Brother, I'm going to pray for you. You know what this is? This is a memorial to intercession. This is a memorial to our missionaries, to the people that are out winning souls day in and day out and day in and day out." My kids know why this one's up there, because I love Brother Matt. Boy, he's helped me in so many ways. Could have talked about him as an instructor. But boy, Brother Matt's been a help to me. And every time when I sit at that desk, I look up and I see our picture and I smile. You say, "Why?" Because I love him and he's my friend and he's been a help to me. You say, "What are you getting at?" Who is it that you're going to pray for and make such a difference in their life? You're going to leave a stone of memorial behind over it. Do you pray enough? Do you pray enough for things that matter? Things other than for yourself, that you've seen prayers answered and there's memorials left behind? Mama, Daddy, have your kids ever seen you pray before other than at the dinner table? Have your kids ever opened up the door on you and you're in there praying, maybe for them? I remember one time, I don't remember which kid, I was sitting in the office and I'd been studying and I bowed my head and I was just in there praying. And they came flying through the door, opened up the door and went. I don't know who it was. They came flying in and they saw, flying back out. Daddy, 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 and they went back out. I want my kids to see me pray. Not as a showpiece, but so they'll know Daddy used to pray. When I'm dead and gone, I want them looking back and telling my grandkids and my great-grandkids, let me tell you about him. Boy, he used to live right. He used to pray. What kind of memorials are you leaving behind? If you left your workplace tomorrow and never went back, what kind of memorials would you leave behind? Would they say, well, he was the real deal. She was sincere. She was right. What would you leave behind? What kind of memorials do you have that you could tell your kids, look what God's done? Let's all stand to our feet this evening. Do you need to come? Just the altar's open. Maybe there's something you need to pray for. Maybe there's something about your children you want to pray for. A grandchild. What kind of heritage, what kind of namesake are you leaving behind for your kids and grandkids and co-workers and neighbors to see? I'm talking about more than a pile of rocks. I'm talking about something that you leave behind, a testimony. All my memorials don't have an object to go with it. All of my memorials don't have a little person, baby Jesus, to associate with it. A lot of my memorials are memories and stories that I can tell my children. What are you leaving behind for somebody else? Be thankful for those memorials God's given you. But what kind of memorials are you placing for someone else to see? I love to read about the old prayer warriors and how God used them in power and how God answered specific prayers. Those are memorials. The problem is we're missing a generation of leaving memorials. We're too busy talking about other people's memorials.